Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi, I'm Cyndy.
Hi, Cyndy.
Wow, there's a lot of you. I just got done telling Tracy that I think I forgot my story. So this is what's happening to me right now. I feel very loved. I can feel God's presence. And I know that you're not going to throw tomatoes at me. I hope. And I'd like to thank the committee and Cece for asking me to do this. When she asked me, I told her it wasn't fair because we were really good friends. And she said it was okay. So here I am. You know, if there's anyone new, I would really like to welcome you. Al-Anon basically saved my ass, and still does today. Before I start my story and telling you where I was and what happened and why I'm here and what's happening to me now, I need to let you know that there's several things that I may say and may not. But to express how it was before and how my behavior was, I might say the F word a couple of times, and I'm apologizing now. Because I am a lady. Right, Judy? And I might cry in the middle of it, and I might not. And I might lose my track of what I'm talking about, and it's going to be gone, and I'm going to have a blank look on my face, and it'll come back, so don't worry. So I was not brought up in an alcoholic home. I was brought up with a mom and a dad, and 3 brothers who were already out of my home, so I was basically brought up by myself. My brothers were already starting their family, so I have nieces and nephews that are a year older than I am. And, you know, we went to church a lot. You know, we were good Baptists, and we went to church on Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. You know, Wednesday we went to prayer meeting, and Thursday was choir practice, and you know, that's what we did, Vacation Bible School, and we did all that. When I was about 13 years old, I gave God the boot because God had too many rules. So I decided no longer needed God in my life. Because like you couldn't go to dances, and you couldn't smoke, and you couldn't do that kind of stuff, and I really need to do that stuff. So when I was in 8th grade is when I met my husband. And I just need to tell you before I forget, September 4th, we just celebrated 38 years of marriage. Yay. And I have 6 children. 5 of them I gave birth to, and 1 came into our lives when he was 13, and he's now 37, and he's still with us, so he's mine. And I have 7 grandchildren, and I'm very blessed. I'm trying not to say a lot. I'm saying I don't like that. Okay, so I'll try to stop. So I met my husband in 8th grade, and my husband comes from a family of long alcoholics, drug addicts. That's mother, father, siblings, and my house was pretty boring, and I liked that. I liked it when he drank. It was exciting. There's a lot of things that went on, a lot of drama, a lot of parties at his house. I would sneak out of my home. Okay, my daughter's here, but I think she already knows the story. I would sneak out of my home, 1 o'clock in the morning, meet him at the corner, and go to his house because there was still a party going on. And then I'd get back into, sneak in through the window of my bedroom and be all safe. So there was just a lot of drama, and I loved it. We decided to get married, and by the time I was 20, I had 2 children. He was 16 when we got married, and I just turned 18. And my goal was to marry Tommy and have his children. That's all I wanted to do. College was not anything that I wanted to do. I just wanted to marry him and have his babies and stay home, and that's what I did. So I accomplished my goals. So, in this drama, the drinking was going on, and there was a lot of parties. And I was the person who took care of the children. That was my job, and that's what I did. There was, between me and his sister, there were 10 kids. So a birthday party, people at our parties, what we did, I don't know about your parties, but at our parties, what we did, barbecued. And, we had the keg of beer, and it was a 3-year-old birthday party, but, all the family was there, and everybody's getting drunk, and it was time to put the kids to bed, and I fed them and got them in their jammies and made sure that everybody was all warm and cozy, and everybody was outside drinking, and that's what went on for a lot of years. It became very normal. Fights broke out, whether it was a sister fighting the sister, or the brother fighting the brother, or everybody fighting the mother, the fights broke out. And at that time, my 2 children, the 2 older ones, are the ones that were a part of that. I had to share real quick. I go to a meeting once in a while when I can make it, and it's Wednesday morning. It's in just brand new meeting. It's at Arroyo Verde Park in Ventrua, and it's at a place where they rent it out, like for barbecues and stuff. And when my middle child was baptized, and I remember just sitting at this meeting, and I'm thinking back what had happened when we baptized my middle child, and we had this big old barbecue, and the family was all there. And we invited some cousins who were from another town, which was El Rio, and some other cousins came from Saticoy, and somebody pulled out a gun. And so everybody was ducking and running, and I remember having that baby in my arms, and that's the kind of drama that went on. And then after everything was over, everybody came to my house to figure out who was going to do what next. And there I was, taking care of the kids, and the retaliation was on, and who was going to jump in the car and who was going to go kick ass, and that's what we did. And my kids saw things and heard things that they shouldn't have seen or heard. And I really want to blame him, but because this is an honest program, I get to tell you my behavior, because this is who I'm going to talk about. So, now I realize that I did the best mothering that I could do, but the kind of mothering I did is where I was screaming and yelling, and my eyes were bugged out, and spit was coming out of my mouth, and that's how my kids were spoken to by me. He would come home, and it would be 2 o'clock in the morning, and there I would be in the kitchen or at the front door waiting for him to come in. And what our conversation was when he walked in, I would say to him, where were you? Oh, first, have you been drinking? Hello. And then, I would scream at him to get the fuck out. And then I would run to the front door and go like this and tell him, where in the fuck do you think you're going? I'm not going to say that anymore. That's just how I talked back then. And I was serious. I've jumped on hoods of cars. I've taken my kids in the back seat like they were going to the drive-in, because I felt, and I justified everything, because they had their blankets, they had dinner, they were in their jammies, they were in the back seat of our 64 Chevy, and I was in Ventura at the bench warmer at the corner waiting for him to come out, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's what I did. I would send my 12-year-old boy into the bench warmer, and I'd be in the parking lot, and I would be screaming at this kid to go get his dad, and go get him now, and tell him to come here. And my husband would come out, and all he would say to me is, Cyndy, take the kids and take them home. I didn't. So I was the one screaming and yelling. If it was a Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, I was screaming and yelling. I remember hearing a speaker one time And she was describing that she lived in this little town, and there was one bar in this town, and there was a tree. And from that tree, you could see the front door and you could see the back door of that bar. So she would climb that tree. And I totally related, because, there are those of us who will do that. Those are those of us who will climb that tree, who will jump on that hood of the car. What my MO was, I needed to prove a point. I'm getting a little parched. Hold on. Sorry. So if we'd go to that barbecue in Fillmore, 4th of July, and I would tell him, because I have speeches, and I would tell him this speech. Okay, we're going to go to this barbecue, but you know what? You can't be drinking and coming home because I'm not driving. And he just kind of looked at me, and I said, no, really. You can't be drinking and coming home. I'm not driving. I'm serious. I'm not driving. And we would get into our car after it was time to come home, and he had been drinking, and he's pretty drunk, and I had to prove a point. So I'm sure I was pregnant with somebody, and we were in this white, ugly station wagon that we had. And kids in the back seat, and I'm pregnant holding a baby, because, there's a lot of them. And we got in this car, and he's driving, and we're going down the freeway, and he told me that he couldn't drive. He was shutting one eye trying to drive. And I said, fine, pull over. So he pulled over. And from, the town of Fillmore to Ventrua, my kids heard me. And what I did was I called them names, blamed him and told them, and, just did all that stuff that, I did. And this is where I get to come and be honest. So that went on for a lot of years, and I really want to jump to the recovery part. I got a phone call from a sister-in-law who had found Al-Anon, and she was all excited, and she called to let me know that she found this place that, that you can go to. It's for people who are affected by somebody else's drinking. And she thought maybe I'd like to go with her. And I told her, I don't think so. I think I'm good. And she kept on, kind of telling me what was going on. I said, you know what, I'm good. I got everything under control. I'm fine. I know what to do. If he's passed out, I leave him in the car. If he passed out on the floor, I walk over him. I didn't do blankets. I didn't know how to do that then. Didn't cover him with a blanket. So, and I was serious. And I really believed that I had everything under control until it got to the point where, and she never bugged me. She never called and, insisted. She just said, okay. After that phone call, it took me 8 years to find Al-Anon. And in that 8 years, a lot of things happened. I had gotten to a place where I was angry and didn't know why. Screaming and yelling at my kids all the time. Never dawned on me to say I love you, say good morning, say good night. I was busy. So I had to make sure that the kids' uniforms were clean. I had to make sure that, they did their homework, and I had to make sure that they had their backpacks. And it didn't ever dawn on me when those kids got in the car to ask them how their day went. I didn't know how to do that. So what I did instead was I said things, I barked. I barked orders and demands. And I had gotten to the point where I physically got sick. In 1995, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, which is cancer of the lymph nodes. And what they basically did is they made me really sick and got me really well. I went through chemotherapy for 7 months, and then I was in remission for 9, I believe, and then the cancer came back. And then I went through 6 weeks of radiation and 4 more months of chemotherapy, and I just celebrated 15 years of remission. So it's all good. Thank you. So, I got really sick, and my doctor told me at that time that 2 things can happen, that either my husband and I are going to get very, very far apart, or we're going to get very, very close. And the drinking was still going on. We've never had sobriety in my home. The drinking is still active. So I got really sick, got really close to my husband in the sense where, he just took charge. He took care of me. And the kids, everybody was fine. And got to a point where we went to a softball game. My daughter, the middle one, played a lot of softball, and we were at a game. And, and after the game, okay, this is what we did. So we're at the game, and she's up to bat, and I'm on the bleacher standing, and I'm looking in the parking lot to see where he's at and what he's doing. Because I'm worried that he's missing her at bat, but I'm not watching her at bat because I'm watching him. There was a lot of dads in the parking lot, and a lot of moms. That's just what they did. So after the game is over, we'd go to a restaurant, and my husband's pretty drunk at that point, and everything he did pissed me off. I hated how he walked, how he talked, how he brushed his teeth, how he combed his hair, and everything he did. When he walked in the room, I was so pissed off and didn't know why. So that daughter of mine wanted to know. And she said, "How come you're so mad?" And I looked at her, and my face was like this. And I said, sorry, I got to say it again because that's what I said. I said, "I'm not fucking mad. Leave me the fuck alone." And I knew I was in big trouble. So I went to work, and I remember being in the nurse's office, and I think I called AA Central Office. I'm not sure. But somebody gave me information that there was an Al-Anon meeting at Ventrua College, and I went to that meeting. There was only 3 people there, and there was a woman by the name of Tony, who is now in Oklahoma, and I got my first Al-Anon hug. It was awesome. So after that, when I came into Al-Anon, basically I knew I didn't want a divorce. I just knew that I wanted answers. I wanted to know how to get him sober, and I wanted to know now, and I wanted to go home, and I was going to tell him, and he was going to do it. And I really thought that, really. So that was my plan, and my intention was not to stay. My intention was not to get a sponsor. My intention was not to work the steps, and my intention definitely was not to develop relationships with God or with you. That wasn't part of my plan. So this woman who called me, who was my sister-in-law at the time, who is now my ex-sister-in-law, is now my sponsor. And we say to each other all the time, who would have thunk? Because, I have no idea what God had in store for me. And so I went to meetings. I went to meetings for 2 years without telling my husband. When all this stuff was going on, me going to meetings, things started changing in my home, and I could feel God's presence in my home, but this drinking was still going on. One of the things that happened with my kids before I found Al-Anon that I'm not proud of, and I'm just going to share it really quick, is I remember being in the laundry room with one of my daughters, and she said something smart. I don't even remember what was said. But it just triggered me into a place of what they call that blackout, whiteout, whatever. But I got into the place, and I turned around, and I just started hitting her. Now, these are things that I'm not proud of, but this is what I get to share with you because I know I'm not alone in this. And I remember her going to her room and putting on her shoes because she was going to run away. I can't remember if she left. I can't remember if I talked her out of it, but I know I apologized in there somewhere, I think. So as I started going to Al-Anon, I didn't have a relationship with God. And you guys talked about God, and I wasn't going to do the God thing, and I told you I wasn't going to do the God thing, and you guys just told me to keep coming back. And I started working those steps. And the second step is real important to me because just those beginning words of the second step where it says, I came to believe, are all of those stories that we have, how we came to believe for me. So I have all those I came to believe stories. I have 2 kids, my 2 youngest ones, they're 14 months apart. And it's really hard for me to share my story and not say their names. And I've asked permission to share, to talk about them. My daughter said I could because she talks about me all the time, so it's okay. So these 2 younger ones, well, Jamie one time, she was arguing with my husband. And she was arguing to the point where what I used to do is I would go like this and tell her to shut up. Because I just knew that she was going to set him off and all hell was going to break loose. So my solution was to shut her up. And she didn't shut up. And they kept on, and I got really scared. So I ran to the phone and I called my sponsor, and she wasn't home. Her husband at the time answered, and I said, "Where's Tracy? I need to talk to Tracy." And he said, "Well, she's not home yet. She hasn't come home from work." I said, "Okay, well, as soon as she gets home, have her call me because I need to talk to her." And he said, "Okay." And I hung up, and I looked outside my window, and there she was, looking through my window. She was working in Port Hueneme doing nursing stuff because that's what she does. And I also asked her if I can share that, and she said, "Okay." So, covering all my bases. And she was, looking out that window, and I opened the door, and I know I grabbed her by the collar, and I threw her ass in. I know I did. And by that time, my husband had left, and one more time, my daughter was putting on her shoes to run away. And we talked to her, and Tracy was saying things to her about my actions and about his actions, and telling her, she was talking to her like an Alateen, and she was talking to her like she was an Alateen sponsor, which she was. And I felt a little offended because, you know what? I don't want to talk about that stuff. There's no problem here. I was still very new. Out of the worst things that have happened in my life, a lot of miracles have happened because of them. After being in program for 2 years, my youngest son, Alex, was diagnosed with brain cancer. He's fine. I always forget to tell you guys, but he's fine. He's way fine. He was diagnosed with brain cancer, and he, at the time, was an Alateen. Jerry W. was his sponsor, along with Pam, and when he started going to Alateen, I remember being really afraid because I wouldn't be there to monitor him. I wouldn't be there to tell him, "No, don't say that. Okay, you can say that, but don't say that." And it was the best thing that happened to this little boy. My sponsor would pick him up and take him to El Capitan and took him to SCAC when he just turned 12, and all these things that were really a gift. When he got sick, I called her up, and my husband was working in West Africa at the time. And that's the one thing, too. Okay, don't forget where I'm at in the story, cancer, West Africa, Alex, okay. I really thought that we were okay because my husband has always worked. He's always had a job. He's always been real involved with the family and with the kids. He loves his family. He never hit me, never got beat up. There wasn't that kind of violence. So I think that's why I stuck around for so long. I think I was married 23 years by the time I got to Al-Anon. And I really thought that I had everything under control. So when Alex got sick, Tommy was working in West Africa, and I called up my sponsor because I love telling this story. She just got this job, I think about a month or so, and I could be wrong, but that's what I think, so I'm going to say it. Working for a doctor who specializes in children's diseases, and cancer is one of them. So I called her up and I said, "Okay, Alex's left arm, it's completely numb, and he can't lift it up. He'd have to go like this, and he's dragging his left leg, and he says that his brain feels funny, and I don't know what to do." And she said, "Take him to ER in Ventrua and tell him everything that you're telling me." She said, "Right now I'm watching the Laker game, and call me when you find out what's going on." And I said, "Okay." So I didn't think anything of it, she's watching the Laker game, okay, she's busy, she doesn't want to meet me, all right, fine. And when I showed up, there she was in the parking lot. So, her and I were on this journey with this little boy, and they did what I call a drunk test, because they did this whole thing, to see his, equilibrium and I don't know, whatever. And we found out there was a lesion. And there was a doctor there who was misdiagnosing him. And then I had my sponsor with me who was saying, we can go see this other doctor who I work for. And so in the middle of the day, I went, and this doctor stopped what he was doing and let me cry and told me that they would take care of Alex. And we went to Children's Hospital, and little parched, hold on. When they did I get biopsy and autopsy mixed up. I think it's biopsy. So when they did that, they basically told me that the cancer was all over his brain and he was going to die. He's fine. I had to remember that. So they told me that, and what I did was, she was with me the whole journey with my husband, and there we were, the three of us. And I went to a meeting that night. We came home and I went to a meeting and I shared, and you guys held me up, and that's what happens. And I remember him being at Community Hospital, and his sponsor, Jerry, wanted to go and visit him, and I was really worried because my husband didn't know what we were doing. So how was I going to explain, who Jerry was? I couldn't say the Alateen sponsor because he didn't know we were going to Al-Anon and Alateen. So, yeah, I lied. Okay. So, and I remember being in the parking lot with my sponsor and crying and just telling her, I don't want him to die. And things started to change with the diagnosis once they started doing more and more research and x-rays and stuff. So what happened was, her and I went into the hospital, and I think my husband and my son were visiting Alex, and I don't know how it happened, but Jerry, my husband and son walked out, and Jerry walked in. So they were probably in the elevator together or something, and had no idea who the other one was. And I didn't have to do anything. God took care of it. And that's where that whole thing I came to believe. I started feeling God's presence. I started changing my behavior. What I heard in the meetings was to do the opposite of what you would normally do. I remember I called up my sponsor and said, okay, these kids aren't minding me. They're not doing nothing. There's backpacks, and no one's doing dishes, they're not doing this, And she said, well, are you asking them? No. I'm telling them they need to do this. They know. They're not stupid. They know they need to do this. She said, well, you might want to ask them. Oh, all right. So that's opposite of what I would normally do. So I started just simply saying, okay, this is what we need to do. My daughter, the youngest one, I have little stories. I'm sorry, I'm just a little storyteller, but I have this daughter who's my youngest daughter, and because of you guys, she came to me and told me that she was pregnant, and that she was not going to keep the baby, that she was going to give the baby up for adoption. And I remember calling my sponsor, and I remember going to a meeting, and I told my daughter, wait a minute, we don't give away our babies. That's not what we do. Meaning Mexicans don't give away their babies. Okay, whatever. You're going to hear a lot about that, too. And another thing, too, is that I always thought that just Mexicans drank. I never knew Italians drank and Germans drank or any, I really... Okay, so where was I? I was with the part with... Jamie's pregnant. Okay, she's going to give away the baby. And so what I got to do is just, I just hugged her and told her whatever she decided. And I remember going to meetings and crying and saying, I was scared. I did not want her to give away this baby, but I knew I just needed to mind my business and just let her do what she needed to do, and I prayed a lot. And she came to me and she said, I don't think I can give the baby away. Can you help me? And I got to say that famous line, this is what I'm willing to do. And I got to set a boundary. I'm willing to let you stay here, but I'm not willing to quit my job to take care of your kid. This boy just turned 8 years old, and it's all good. I think God lets me do do-overs because with my grandchildren, I get to do it different. My daughter, Jamie and Alex, the ones that are 14 years apart, when he got sick, they had a relationship before he got sick where she just hated him. And she would tell you, she was 14, he was 13, and it was that sibling thing, and she hated him. She gave him a really hard time and didn't ever want to be around, and she was very mean. When he got sick, we came home that afternoon, and she was in my bedroom, and she was crying. And she said to me, I would never tell anyone again that I hate them and I wish they would die. And I got to hold her and love her. And today their relationship is unbelievable. It's so nice to see those two. I mean, they just love each other. And to me, that's God. So once I got into program and I started doing things different, I had a friend of mine who happens to be here who, what she used to say is, don't ever expect a standing ovation. And I didn't get what that meant. And I remember being in the middle of the street with one of my kids screaming at me, why was I going to those stupid meetings? Didn't I know that my kids were at the beach and they were doing drugs and they're, out in the streets and all this stuff, and that they're not your family, we're your family, and what are you doing? And I went to a meeting, and I remember being so torn, not knowing if I was doing the right thing or not. And thank God I kept going to meetings, and today this daughter is attending Al-Anon meetings, and it just amazes me how God can handle all this stuff and take care of everything. When I started working the steps, there was a lot of things I didn't understand. There's a lot of things I didn't understand, the way you guys talked. Okay, so I don't remember my mother ever saying, oh, I really have a resentment towards your father today. Who talks like that? Nobody talks like that. I mean, if you're in program, I guess, but not normal people, they don't talk like that. We don't wake up in the morning saying, oh, I'm really obsessing. So, I came to you guys and I would say stuff because I wanted to know, okay, so does obsessing mean when I have that headache and that stomach ache, is that me obsessing? And you said yes. I said, okay, so when you're talking about being self-righteous, does that mean when I'm acting like my shit doesn't stink? And you said yes. Okay, so that, that's just where I came from. That's just how we talked. I don't like change, obviously, because I've been married for so long, for 38 years. I've also lived in the same home for 50-some. We moved into this house when I was 5, and my family and I are living in that home today. And to me, that's awesome. I wasn't a good daughter. My mother and I had a lot of issues. And I'm really grateful to those steps. I remember going to a meeting and somebody sharing about doing their 9th step at the cemetery and reading a letter to a parent. And I thought, oh my God, I am not doing that. How stupid is that? And when you guys talked about, about loving yourself, I thought, okay, that's really stupid too, and I'm not doing that either. So obviously I was kind of rebellious and I wasn't going to do a lot of things. And I remember when it was time and doing those steps, and I called this woman who shared that story, and I told her I wrote a letter to my mother, and could she please go with me to the cemetery? And she said I would be honored. And I read this letter, and in that letter what I got to do is I got to ask for forgiveness, and I got to forgive her. And this woman rubbed my back. And then after that, we went to a meeting. But I'm sure we went out to eat first because we did a lot of that. So, the whole deal is that I finally did get to tell my husband that I was going to Al-Anon. And a lot of you have heard this story, but I was treasurer for Wednesday night at the base, and I needed to make a report, and I hid everything. So I had to count the money. So it was... 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was in the bathroom, and I had all the quarters lined up and all the dimes lined up, and I was journaling and making sure that, I was counting all the money. And as I sat there, I thought, oh my God, what are you doing? And I knew it was time to tell him. He got in the car, and because of his job, he works in the oil field business, and every other month he's gone. He now works in Kuwait. He's worked in West Africa for 5 years, and then he went to Papua New Guinea for 5 years, and now he's in Kuwait. And what I got to do is when he got in the car, and I was taking him from our house, South Oxnard, to the Oxnard airport, and I knew it was time. And, I'm always saying, you'll know. You'll just know. Whatever's time, you'll just know. And I knew. He got in the car, and I said, I got to tell you, I'm going to this program, and it's called Al-Anon, and it's for people who are affected by somebody else's drinking. And it's not, I'm doing this for me. And he said, Cyndy, do what you need to do because I do what I do. And I took him to the airport, and I remember calling my sponsor, and, one of those phone calls, oh my God, guess what just happened? And crying, and I knew that it was going to be okay. In my journey, another thing that we've done is we had an opportunity to move. His job took him to a country called Qatar, whatever. We lived in the capital called Doha, and we are neighbors to Saudi Arabia. They don't have Al-Anon meetings there. They might now, but they didn't then. It was in 2004. And I remember talking to a good friend of mine in program and telling her, I feel really at peace about this. I left my kids in my home, which, I don't know, maybe it wasn't a real good idea, but I did. And so we moved, and I was there, and a friend of mine who is in both programs, a really good friend of mine, gave me a list of AA members that I could call in Doha.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
So I remember going, and I didn't do Al-Anon meetings, but I was reading my literature, and I was calling you guys, and I thought that I was okay. And I came home during the summer, because that's what happens over there. It gets too hot, and all the wives and the kids go home wherever home is, whether it's, England or Scotland, Ireland, California, wherever. So, and I remember coming home and then going back, and my old behavior started again. I started counting beers, and I'm a counter. And if I had enough time, I'd count to see how many people were here, but I don't have enough time right now. So there I was, and I was emailing, and when you guys were asleep, we were awake, and when I was awake, you guys were asleep. I had a friend who was really like that, because she would call me, and it was the middle of the night, because her son was out and about, and she couldn't sleep, and I was wide awake, because it was daytime for me, so that worked for us. Except when it got to the point where, one more time, I went into that place of loneliness. And I remember, praying to God and wanting to know what my purpose was, because I couldn't understand why I was there. So what I did was I called one of those numbers. And it was a guy from Scotland, and his name was Ian. And he called me, I called him and said, I need to get to a meeting. And there's no Al-Anon meetings. I'm an Al-Anon. And he said, well, there's plenty of AA meetings, I'll go pick you up. And I said, no, I'll get a ride there. He said, no, I'll go get you. And those nice men picked me up 3 nights a week and took me to AA meetings. And there I was in the Middle East. And I used to think to myself, okay, here I am, a Chicana from Oxnard, in the Middle East with these men, there was like 9 to 13 men. And I was always questioning God, because I didn't get it. And I remember one of the guys told me one time, Cyndy, you never share. And I said, are you kidding? I am so honored that you guys are letting me come to your meeting. This is not my meeting. And he said, yes, it is. And so I got to share with these men of Alcoholics Anonymous. And to tell you the truth, I thought at that time that the only way that I would appreciate Alcoholics Anonymous is if my husband got sober. And that's not true. A little parched. These men saved my ass. And I'll be very grateful, truly grateful, forever for them. So we made a decision. I came home, and my husband stayed over there for a year, because I needed you guys. I just couldn't do it anymore. My kids needed me. I needed my kids. I needed my grandchildren, so I came back. And so did he. And so now he's doing the Kuwait thing every other month. And what I get to do today because of you is I get to God bless him instead of God damn him, because I did that for a long time too. I blamed him for everything, and I really thought that he drank just to piss me off. It's amazing what my little brain used to think. For a long time, the way I was brought up, I felt that the only way that I could say that I was smart is if I had a degree, or if I wore high heels and a dress and went to work with a briefcase. That would show you how smart I was. For a long time, I just really thought that I was dumb. And when I came to you guys, this whole thing about doing service showed me that I can do things that I never thought that I could do. And I found out, and I'm owning it today, and I used to think that if I said it out loud, it meant that I was conceited. And you know what? I'm smart. And I'm loyal. And I'm a pleasure to be around today most of the time. And there are times when I get where I can't breathe. And what I get to do is I get to call you up, and I just get to simply say, I don't know what to do and I can't breathe. And that's being in Al-Anon for 14 years. I can still get to that place where I can't breathe. And what's different is that you're there on the phone and you're telling me it's going to be okay. And I believe you. There were things, I was so afraid of everything. And, I couldn't drive over the grade. I would be one of those because I'd had to drive because he was drunk. We'd go to Dodger games. We're a real sports kind of family. So a lot of times he drove up there, but I'd have to drive back. And I was just one of those drivers driving down the grade with your hands like this, and your neck's like this, and you're like this. I don't drive like that today. I was told certain things, people told me, to put God in the car with me. And what happened is when Alex got really sick, he had to go to Children's Hospital every day for 6 weeks. My husband took us for the first 2, and after that, I had to take him, and God was there. And I get to experience different things, and even though cancer is a outside issue, it's part of my life, because what I get to do today is I get to give back, and you guys have taught me that. I get to be a part of Make-A-Wish Foundation. I get to be a wish granter. These things I get to do because of you. And that fear, when that fear comes where I can't breathe, you guys are there. And I got to tell you, standing here, I can be, it's pretty scary up here. And I want to talk about Alateens. I had an opportunity to be Alateen coordinator, and I had an opportunity to be an Alateen sponsor. And I always share that there's nothing like walking down a hallway and an Alateen running up to you and being so happy to see you and knowing your name and just giving you that hug. And what I got to do was give back, because somebody picked up my kid, and somebody took my kid to SCAC. And what I got to do is I get to do that for those kids. And I love Alateens, and they saved my ass. And then with sponsorship and sponsees. I believe today that there are women in my life, not only my sponsor, but there are women that I trust, feel safe with, and I go to. There are people that I've seen before me with service who have that dignity and grace, and they look like to me they know what they're doing. And they always say, they're just doing what they're being asked to do, and they look so confident, and they look, and they're scared too. I had an opportunity to be with a friend of mine who we lost, and she helped me. She helped me with service. She was an example. And at that time when she was really sick, and she was chair and I was co-chair, and I got to be of service to her, and she was service to me. It was just an awesome thing, and I felt God's presence. And now that she's gone, and now that I'm chair for Intergroup, AIS, sorry. I'm doing things because she told me I could. And that's what you guys do. Quick little story. And this is with, the help of the steps. When I started doing these steps and I started seeing a change, I was one of those that I talk shit about you when you walked in, talk shit about you when you're here, and I talk shit about you when you left. That's just what I did. And I found other women who did that too. So we were good gossipers. And I remember being at work, and what I did for a living is I was the school nurse. You were the nurse. I worked in the school cafeteria. I was the one that would say to your kids, green beans, green beans, green beans. And in that job, I remember, cooking and being in the kitchen with 3 other women, and I started talking about the gal who takes the money and how much she gossips. So I am gossiping about somebody who gossips. Okay. And these are things that I started noticing and finding out. And what was said to me was, Cyndy, when you get there to work, before you cross that threshold, you ask God to help you be the best Cyndy that you can be. You go to those women and you say good morning to them and you say their first name. You touch them. That's another thing I was told to do. With my husband, because I hated everything he did, I was told to... I think she told me 90 days, and I did 30. And I think she told me to do a whole bunch of stuff, to tell him that I was so grateful and it was such an honor to have him as a husband, all this other stuff. I couldn't do that. So I picked my own stuff, because that's just the kind of girl I am. And what I did was every day for 30 days, I just touched him. And it was huge. So he would be, sitting down, doing whatever, and I would just walk by and I would just say, I'll be back, and I would just touch his shoulder. And then before I know it, I'm rubbing his back, and I'm saying, okay, I'll be back in a while, gotta go. And then I'd be rubbing his shoulders and saying, okay, I love you very much. I'll be back, I gotta go. I'm going to a meeting. And that's God, totally. It wasn't me, it's God. All these little things that started happening at work. And I had to be real careful and program. Now, I don't know about you, but, and I never thought that I was controlling, but I'm finding out that, maybe I am, just a little bit. So what I have to be careful with is me being controlling over somebody else's controlling. I mean, think about it. For me, if I go to a meeting and somebody's changed something, and first thing I want to do is, okay, who said that? Did we have a group conscience? Who said that we could do this? And I'm investigating and I'm checking it out and I want to know. Then I have to, talk to somebody, and then I have to figure out, okay, how important is this? And there are some things that are very important. There are some things that are important to me in my program, in the unity of the group, where I get to speak up. And sometimes I'm not real popular when that happens. But I love this program. And you guys have taught me that I get to do and I get to have a voice. Those 2 kids of mine, the youngest ones, I'm just picking those 2 young ones, boy. And I remember one time they were fighting, and I called somebody up. Her name was Margaret. And she now lives in Missouri. And I called up Margaret and I said, you know what, these kids are going to beat the shit out of each other. Sorry. And I said, and I don't know what to do. And then she said, let's get a gratitude list going. I said, what? She goes, let's start talking about, how grateful you are for these kids. All right. She said, well, are they drinking? I don't think so. Are they doing drugs? No, I don't think so. She said, okay, well, that's good. Are they in school? Yeah. She said, okay, you know what? How about let's go to a meeting? No, you don't get it. They're going to beat the crap out of each other right now. I need to do something. I can't go to a meeting. She said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Okay, so she came and picked me up. Went to this meeting in Ventrua. I think it was a Saturday night meeting. I went to this meeting, and what I heard of that meeting was to put God in the door before you. So on my way home, I silently prayed and just asked God to enter that room, and I'll meet him in the kitchen. And that's exactly what I said. And when I got to the front door, my daughter Jamie was standing there, and she said, me and Alex talked about it, and we just figured we're not going to fight anymore because we always get grounded, and I want to go out, and so we're not going to fight anymore. And she walked away. Now, these are little stories that, that happen. I have a napkin story. I found out that when I started being kind to others, I'm not that kind of Al-Anon that makes sure that everybody has and taken care of. I'm the kind of Al-Anon that every man for themselves. And so I remember being at work, and, we'd have the women who would make sure everyone had napkins and everyone had glasses of water and everybody was all okay before we sat down. And I just got my food and sat down. When I started getting napkins for others, I started noticing that my behavior was changing, and I was starting to be a pleasure to be around. I was starting to be kinder. When I walked in, my heart was so hard, and because of you guys, it became very smushy. And it was a process. It didn't happen overnight. Just like the God thing, it didn't happen overnight. So my heart got really smushy, and all these different little things started happening. Do I have a lot of time left? Oh, okay, 15 minutes. This is usually, I can go like 40 minutes and I'm doing really good. And then after that, I kind of go down. Okay, so what I get to talk to you is about sponsees. God has put in my life these women who, a lot of them are the same ages as my daughters. And I'm really grateful, because what happens is, I had this one sponsee who has problems with her mom. So she'll call me. And sometimes I have problems as a mom with my daughters, and she helps me. And that one daughter, the youngest one that I talk about a lot, my Jamie, has found the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. She celebrated a year. And that wasn't part of my plan. And I remember I was at with a bunch of Al-Anon women. There was about 40 of us on a weekend that we do once a year. And my daughter got arrested, and she got a DUI. And my older daughter called me. And her sponsor at the time was standing there and talking to her. And the first thing I said was, "That's good. I'm really glad. Okay, she's busted, she's in jail, that's good. That's really good." And I kept talking, and my friend Dallas said, "Cyndy, you're not breathing." Because I just kept talking and talking. "This is really good. I'm so glad. Okay, this is really good. Okay, she's in jail. Okay, fine, this is really good. This is really good." And I was scared. But you know what? She didn't call me. I was just told where she was at. And I got to see this girl figure out what she needed to do. She paid her fines. She didn't drive. I got to be of service when I wanted to, and that's another thing that I got to change, is that I get to say, okay, and yes, I will. Yes, I'll babysit. Yes, I'll pick them up. Yes, I'll do this if I want to. It's not that much anymore, maybe sometimes, but not a lot, where I do it because I want them to like me. I had my oldest son where I realized, okay, he has my car and I'm taking the bus. Something's wrong with that. And that was kind of pointed out to me. Okay, something's wrong with that. And I didn't know. And that was the one kid that I was so afraid that he wouldn't like me. And there was a lot of things that my parenting, I just thought that when your boys, especially your boys, when they turned 4 and 5 years old, you quit hugging them. So as that young man got older, I started noticing he did not know how to hug. So what I got to do instead was I got to feed him, I got to feed his friends. And I got to do things for him because that was my way. I didn't know any other way. Ugh. And obviously this stuff is still stuck in there. But what I got to do is now I get to say to him, okay, hug me like you like me. So he'll get both his arms, and that's how he hugs today. I have a daughter who's made a decision, a choice, whatever, for right now, who is not part of our family. I haven't talked to her, it was a year in June. And whatever her reason is, I really don't know. And it can be very painful. But the deal is that, what I get to do today is I get to look at and concentrate on the children who want to be around me. And I just get to turn her over to God. She's on a journey, she's on a path. I don't know. But that wasn't part of my plan either. So now I just get to realize that this is all about God and God's plan for me. And all these little stories that I've told you, and I have one really last little story. Sorry. But they're part of my stories. I'm not drunk or anything, really. And I'm not on drugs. This is just how I am. My oldest son lives in Arizona. And this, this story is just showing you how what can happen to me still. And we're driving to Arizona, and we're going through Malibu, and I'm driving, and he doesn't like the way I'm driving, and he's telling me to turn left, and I'm not, and he's yelling at me, and I'm telling him, and he's telling me, and and something really little turns really big really fast. So I pull in, and I park the car, and he said, I'm going to go into Taco Bell. I'm going to go to the bathroom and get something to eat. You want to go to the bathroom? No. He said, do you want something to eat? And I said, no. I said, all right. So I shut the door. So I called my friend Debbie. And I said, you know what? I'm going to show him a thing or two. I'm not peeing until we get to Arizona. I'll show him. She goes, okay. And then, I get to reason it out, and I get to figure it out. Okay, so then I went to the bathroom, and I got something to eat, because it's 7 hours, 6 hours. But you know what? That's where I went. And, and I get to have compassion in my heart. And I'm just going to share this one little story about him, because I don't like to talk bad about this man who I love today, who is a good dad, who is a good man, he's a good husband. We were driving up north, and, and it never dawns on me or never realized that he has to figure out how he's going to drink when him and I are together and we're in the car for 7 hours. Because he's at the point in his drinking where a lot of it is hidden. He doesn't have the beer in the house. He's, the little garage drinker. That's just what he does. And he's my beer drinker, and the kids benefit by the cans, $40 a month, taking the cans. God bless Dad. So, we're driving up north, and I pull into the gas station to put gas in, and he goes, I'm going to go to the bathroom. I said, all right. So he didn't know that I was going to move my car, and as I moved my car, I saw him coming out of the store. He had a beer in a bag, and he had a Gatorade. And then he went into the bathroom, and he came out with a Gatorade in the bag, and the beer was gone. And I knew what he was doing, and I called somebody up. And I couldn't breathe. And what I got to do is just love him anyway. I didn't have to say, because what I want to do is I want to say, I don't want him to think I'm an idiot. That's real important to me, that he knows that I know what he's doing. And you're not going to pull one over on me, and I'm not an idiot. And thank God you guys are there, because I call you up because I want to tell him I'm not an idiot, and I just get to love him anyway. And that's what's different for me today. I was told here that it's okay for me to love an alcoholic, and it's okay for me to be married to one. I can't do this by myself. That I know. I know what happens to me when I go to meetings. I know what happens to me when I don't. And I'm one of those that have to do 7 to 8 meetings a week. And if I don't, I'm no longer a pleasure to be around. Ask my kids. They'll ask me, are you going to a meeting? And you know what? This man of mine is also service to Al-Anon. But I started getting a little bit braver, and I started getting more involved, and I started having planning meetings at my home. And what this guy does is he cooks. And you guys come over, and we have these planning meetings at my house, and he cooks and he feeds you. He'll be watering the lawn. He's the little greeter. She's inside. Come on in. We're doing crafts. I did Alateen cookie parties. All these things that I've done in my home, and he's there. And 2 things happened with this convention. One was me and my friend Stella were doing Country Store, and I asked him if he would do these. I had this really good idea where you just get 2 pieces of wood and you make a cross. And then we could put it in the garden and we could decorate it. You can paint it and do turtles or frogs or whatever on this little stick. It's pretty big. And so he made all these crosses and, brought them in and we're painting them and making them all beautiful. And what I started noticing that as it started getting later in the day, the crosses started getting a little bit more crookeder and crookeder. And I'm not telling you a story to make fun because you know what? That's not what I want to do. I don't want to talk shit about this man who I love today. I'm telling you the stories because you know what? He was being of service. And people wanted those crosses. It means something to them. I was a literature person, and I needed help with the computer. And, those flyers that I make, he does them. And I needed a list of the literature that we have. So there he was on the computer, and he's typing in the titles of our books. And I hear him saying, The Dilemma of the Alcoholic Marriage, and... And then he says, detachment. And then I said, oh, that's just a little pamphlet. He said, oh. And he kept on typing, And so what I get to do is I get to come to you guys and I get to tell you, you know what, this guy, he loves me. And this is what he does. He doesn't take me on vacations. He doesn't, when he comes home, we're not going on for walks on the beach. And all these things are a part of my plan, the way the husband and wife should be. And what he does instead is he cooks, he serves us, he feeds me carne asada, he does every Sunday, the rice and beans, and that's what he does. And it's a gift. Things aren't perfect all the time. I still call you up and tell you that he's a jerk. And I'm sure if he had somebody to call up, he'd probably call up and say, I'm this or that too, because that's just the way it goes. But things are definitely different. How am I doing? Am I okay? 5 more minutes? Okay. I could... I have friends in program today that it's unbelievable to me. Where I get to... go to their homes when crisis happens for them, and I get to give back. We have a really good friend who lost her mom, and I remember I went into the kitchen, and we decided to have a meeting for her because she asked and she was ready. And I went into the kitchen, I don't know, a couple of minutes, came out, and her dining room was full of chocolate and food. Al-Anons came, and that's what I get to see. And we get to be there for people who lose their children. I had an experience where I have this woman who I love today, who I sponsor, and she lost her daughter. And because you guys have taught me, we made the phone calls. And we had, 30, 35 women in my home. And that was a gift. I am so grateful for this program today. And if I've touched just one person, I was told that it's me carrying the message. And I am way done.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.